Today's episode takes us into the world of troubled teen camps, those outrageously expensive programs that promise discipline, character, and personal growth, but usually deliver trauma, injury, and a lifetime of distrust in authority figures. We're talking about the Netflix documentary Hell Camp, which pulls back the curtain on an industry built on desperation, parents who are scared, kids who have no choice, and programs that charge tens of thousands of dollars for what is, in many cases, isolation, humiliation, and physical danger. In this episode, we're digging into the real cost of those camps, not just the shocking price tags, but the physical and psychological damage left behind, and how loosely regulated industry keeps finding new ways to rebrand abuse as tough love. Because if a program needs to be located in the middle of nowhere, run on secrecy, and costs as much as a year of college, maybe the problem isn't your kid. You're listening to Real Stories, Real Problems with Rachael and Roxanne.
Hi, Rachel. How are you doing today?
I'm good, Roxanne. How are you?
Oh,
Better. That one. Did you do that today?
I did it.
her intro. She does the best intros ever.
And for those of you listening, we have a third party in our podcast. We have a guest today. Our guest is Kari Bunn, who is a friend of my husband and has been working on a documentary similar to Hell Camp, which is why she's joining us today, because she has had some experience with this industry. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, Kari?
Please do.
I know your husband from high school. Right before I met your husband, I was sent to one of the schools that made up the entire troubled teen industry. It was called CEDU. It stood for Charles E. Diedrich University. Charles E. Diedrich is the man who started the cults of Synanon. But before Synanon was a cult, it was the first rehab in America.
And if Corey, I love that you're talking about this, but if it gets to be too much,
I've been talking about this for 3 straight years, and
okay.
Yeah, but feel free to tell us at any point that you're not answering a specific question. That's totally fine.
Because
Okay, good.
I've been okay to talk. It took me, I've probably been calloused enough to I can just talk about this and not be affected. 6 months I've been like that, but it's for a year. I've been okay, but it used to be people will call me and tell me what happened to them, and I'd 2 days later I'd open my eyes and okay, these people were telling me stuff. I knew it was true. I believed every word there, and they didn't have to be well, this weird thing happened. You probably won't believe because nobody else does. It's well, no, I know it's true because I went to something similar.
So you're coping with it. This is your coping skills by helping others.
Yeah.
It's not as nice as that. My documentary is mostly to hold the legacy of Liam Sheff, who did Surviving Seeded. And then when Hell Camp came out, Hell Camp was the first. Well, there was Born in Synanon, which came out on one of the other streaming platforms, and then there was Hell Camp. That was kind of the first one that came, and then there was the program. And when the program came out, that was the big wave of recognition for this movement. When we were talking about even doing this podcast, we were well, which documentary should we pick to talk about?
Right.
Because there are just in the last year period, there were Born in Synanon, Hell Camp, the program, then Teen Torture Inc. That was all in less than a year period.
Oh my goodness, that is so much. But please tell us more about Synanon.
So Synanon was this thing that was started in the 50s. It still is actually active in Germany, but nobody really knows that. There's 3 phases. The third phase was a full-on cult, but the first 2 phases was almost a healthy rehab. But what it was is all rehabs today are based on Synanon.
I don't like that.
Nobody really even kind of knows that, because before Synanon, there was just AA. And if you were on drugs, there was no help for you. But Synanon would, if you were on heroin, you would come to this house and you would lay on a couch, and a bunch of other ex-addicts would watch you and make sure that you got sober. And then they would, it was like this hippie commune thing, and then but it was because it was involved with government secret stuff, like it was involved with MK Ultra.
Mm-hmm.
It became something greater, and it got involved into our healthcare system. It became the troubled teen industry. It's a hard thing to explain because also there's so many tributaries, like the Challenger Foundation.
Mm-hmm.
They're hard to look up just because of the space crash in the 80s.
Yeah. You got lost in the Google algorithm.
Right.
And I kind of wonder if that was done on purpose.
Yeah. The Challenger, but I think that, did the schools start before? I think this, and I don't know, it might be around the same time. You could be, I wonder. The thing is that there are words throughout the entire industry that always show up, and challenge or challenger is in everything. I even was reminded while texting somebody, I was texting all my friends, I'm like, is Challenger, is it still open? Like, are any of the Steve Carsano schools like still open? And my friends were like, oh, I don't know, we have to check, because there's just so many legs of these places. And this is kind of a small one, but even in the beginning of Hell Camp, it makes it sound like Paris Hilton, she went to one of these places, but this all started with this one guy. It's not true. These sets of schools are probably like less than 5%. It's like a very, very small part, but it sets the standard, and these places just breed other ones, and it's all in Utah because of religious exemption with like the Mormon Church, and it's Brigham Young University, but this is all from Utah. And if it's not in Utah, the other schools that are super abusive all have to do with fundamental Baptists. Oh yeah. But it's more that they just you can do whatever you want to kids there, and you could do it in the name of the Lord, and there's no regulations. There's no, like, there was no campus for the kids in Hell Camp. Like, I don't know if you noticed that there was no like dorms they had. Like, they seriously were just homeless, and their parents were paying like 50 grand for it.
Well, and on that note, we're going to pause for a moment to give our listeners a trigger warning, so to speak. Roxanne, do you want to?
Yeah, sure. Obviously a major trigger warning for child abuse, as well as sexual abuse, minor trigger warning for animal abuse, which we'll get to in a minute. So if you're not in a good headspace right now and you don't feel like dealing with that, please click off this video. We won't be offended. Watch something through our archives. We have 49 episodes to choose from, or just watch cat videos, because that's how I got to sleep last night after this unholy mess. So practice self-care as always. We'll still be here when you get back.
Yes. And this documentary, Hell Camp, I have seen documentaries about kind of the troubled teen industry before, but this was the first one that I saw that addressed kind of the history of it. And this was the first time I'd ever heard Steve Carsano's name ever. And oh my God, what a douche face. Like,
oh, the creative swearing that Rachel and I came up with.
Oh, so you watched it together too?
I did.
Did you take that part? Because I would have liked to see that.
Oh God, I've never seen Rachel get this upset over the TV, and my mouth was like just hanging open, and it was so, well, it is real, obviously, but there's something knowing about this was actual footage, and not like the Blair Witch Project where there's teen actors acting scared in the wilderness.
And it's not like a recreation.
Exactly.
No, and I know a couple of girls from that. I'm just forgetting which ones I personally know. Like, I know, like, I'm on, Facebook. Like, there's a couple of girls that were in that I'm friends with. I think it might have even been the girl from the beginning with the glasses.
Oh, Nadine?
Yeah, I just can't remember exactly, but I do know that I've spoken to them, like, on Facebook. Like, she was like, oh, I'm one of the girls that was in Hell. But we all, the whole, community, like, if you're in a documentary about this, you'll talk about it because you're ready to most of the time. So most of the time, those people, when they're in something like that, they're still available to talk about it.
Right.
Yeah.
But
And Nadine, the woman from the beginning, because it starts with the brief Paris Hilton clip, and then it drops into talking to a woman named Nadine, telling her story about being kidnapped by men out of her bed and being threatened to be handcuffed if she ran.
Oh, this is one with the salt and pepper hair.
Yeah.
Sat Indian style or something.
so
Yeah.
that whole thing, so that is probably Bill Lane, and I knew that guy. So Bill
Wait,
Lane,
the kidnapper?
yeah, most
Oh,
likely
this
that
is
is
better
a
about.
company of a man that I know that I knew that guy when I was young. So in the Cult of Synanon, there was a man named Bill Lane who made my school CDU. But Bill Lane also made an escort company for the entire troubled teen industry. So what he would do is, if you've ever heard a kid say that before they got sent away, that they were woken up in the middle of the night and they were told, you can come with us the easy way or the hard way, and they held the handcuffs, that is always Bill Lane and his brother. And now, since Bill Lane died I think he died in like 2000, late 2010s, like 2017, his daughter now runs that company. And I don't know her last name because she's married, but that company is still running.
Oh my God.
I mean, one of the statistics that I research, I used to do, I was a college professor, and I used to do a specific unit on the troubled teen industry. Yeah, I know.
When was this? So you remember you're going to tell me this?
Right now. It was one of my favorite ones that as soon as as soon as we finished watching Hell Camp, I went, I'm finding my notes, baby. And I found all my notes. I updated the statistics because the statistics are 5 years old. But one of the things that I found out was they're not sure exactly how many of these camps exist in the United States.
Even I don't freaking know.
They think it's between 70 and 100, but they operate with such secrecy, not only from the general public, as you know, the kids don't even know who the fuck they are. They're even blindfolded and driven around for 9 hours. They could be over on the block.
They are never in the state that they live in. They're always across state lines for some reason. Yeah, and it's we don't even know. Like the campus, there are campuses that were tied to my school that have new schools in them. The people that are have something to say about this, like me, we're so blindsided by the pain, that we're trying to get justice for, that we can't take into account all the other schools. Somebody that I freaking know from playing music, somebody I trust and has been a friend of my entire life, ended up working at a local troubled teen industry school.
Oh wow.
and it went, and he knew about my documentary extensively, and it was a problem because my boyfriend came home. He's like, you know that you can't name Turnbridge in the schools that you're exposing in your documentary because our friend works there. And I'm like, who? He's like, I'm not telling you. So months go by, and then finally I go to hang out with his friend. Did you infiltrate a fucking troubled teen industry school for me? Accidentally.
Oh my God.
Because that's what I thought, because we're such good friends. He's like, well, no, but I'm like, but then I was like, well, do they keep the kids up all night? Do they do this or they? And he's like, no, never. He's like, I'm like, are they allowed to call home ever? He's like, they're allowed to call home twice a day, unsupervised, for 20 minutes. Okay, that school is, that's fine. That's my friends that I had to ask, I had people that are in the community. I'm ask the survivors, is Challenger still up, whatever. And, I heard that, so no actual Challenger or Steve Carson schools are still open. Yeah, she doesn't even know how many schools are open. And what was my train of thought before that? I forget.
We had been talking about Bill Lane and the kidnapping.
Yeah, but all these places are completely connected, and one of those things is the goon. It's called gooning. It's the escort service. But yeah, his name was Bill Lane, and I have his name all over the paperwork of owning this, my school. But it's all one company, and they ran those girls that were definitely kidnapped by Bill Lane in Hell Camp. Yeah.
Well, as we're getting into the documentary and we're seeing that we're being introduced to Steve Cardizano and the creation of the Challenger Foundation, And it brings up that he is kidnapping children, basically being paid by parents to kidnap children and take them to Utah and go on 500-mile forced hikes through the Utah desert in an attempt to break down these children, which, I mean, I would have died. I would not have survived that.
No.
I am so sensitive to heat. I am so sensitive. Like,
I'm on that one. Like, so we had to do stuff like that. Oh, so I think what I was saying is that challenger word is that like like I had one of the things that I had to do was called wilderness challenge. And even my middle, we had phases when I was at school, and the middle one was called challenge. When I went through our wilderness things, like we were super prepared. It was almost hard, but it was like their stuff, it was all the time. They were just outside, just constantly moving. There's a reason. I think that there's a specific reason why, like, he ended up on boats and stuff. 'Cause I'm pretty sure. I mean, you might want to edit this, but I think that Steve Carson was tied to L. Ron Hubbard.
My theory was that
Fjord
boats
Scientology
to be on international waters for tax.
There's that, but
nobody knows where the money went. I mean, this was, I don't even know where the money went. I went, it's an offshore banking account, baby. You're never seeing that.
And that's the thing, is that a lot of the survivors now are trying to, sue or, like follow the money or, whatever. My whole thing is that we all share one thing where we were abused in a very specific way that if we talk about, we'll remember. And it's like, it's so, what they did to all of us is just so weird that we wouldn't talk about it. It was like they did such weird stuff to us on purpose that when I started my documentary, I the first time that I was interviewing somebody that didn't go to my specific school, I didn't even know what I was gonna say to him, because I didn't know I was gonna interview him until like an hour before he showed up. And I was like, I knew I wanted to talk to people from your school when I realized that you guys had a character stretch, and one of your friends had to dress up like Ricky Martin and sing "Livin' La Vida Loca." And he goes, "Oh yeah, we had something like that. I know what to say now." So that's the kind of
like fraternity hazing. And for humiliation purposes, right?
And that's also what it is. It's that when I was on the Cult Vault, I was really happy that she made a reel of something that I figured out. It's called the character stretch. It's in cults and like Freemasons and like fraternities, sororities. It's any sort of thing where there's like a rite of passage, like you have to make a fool out of yourself.
Yeah.
And the community rewards you or loves you or love bombs you for it. And sometimes you get physically raised up into the sky. Like have you ever seen Midsummer?
That didn't end well though.
Yeah, because it's a cult. But the part where she does that dance, she wins that dance competition, and then they actually physically raise her up.
Right.
That's the character stretch. It's also like speaking in tongues. It's like a leap of faith. You're expected to do something by a group, and that transforms you somehow, whether it's real or not. You're praised enough afterwards so that like it does something. But a lot of times they take pictures, like I don't know if you remember, there was pictures of JD Vance in drag. He was in Skull and Bones, and I think
Hale, right? Yeah. Oh yeah, and so was one of the I believe was
that was George W. That was W. Yeah,
segment. I'm wondering if the reason that the recidivism rate is so high at 80% is because when the kids get home, they know they're not going to be dragged by a truck if they mouth off to their mom. I
forget what recidivism means. What is that word?
A repeat offender.
So, yeah, one of the things that was addressed in this documentary is that a lot of these kids went through the program and they got out, and whether they were saying it for the camera or they meant it, they talked about being changed, that they were better, and then within a month of leaving the program, they were back on drugs. They were back doing whatever they were doing.
Right.
And even Steve Cardizano's kids, as they address later in the documentary, both his kids develop serious heroin addictions. Both of them end up in prison. One of his kids gets sent to his camp that's out in the Samoan Islands. And they come back and they both are no better for it.
These places, most of these kids went there for nothing. I got sent away for taking 10 Tylenol, and my dad said it was a suicide attempt. That's why I was sent away for 2.5 years, and it cost my dad like 52 grand a year. I took 10 Tylenol once.
Well, I mean, taking 10 Tylenol is definitely not a healthy choice, but that in and of itself does not indicate, oh, okay.
Yeah,
It's not just banging Blackheart's heroin into her arm. I mean, it's tough.
I knew gangbangers at my school too. I knew girls that cut on themselves to levels that were just. There was like a girl that was there for just like not knowing how to take care of her diabetes. There were people that were obviously autistic, and their parents just paid for them to not have to deal with it. But then I would also be there with boys that definitely were sent away for peeving on their sisters. Stuff, you were sent there with anybody. And like they took anybody in it.
And all these people are given the same treatment.
Exactly the same treatment.
I mean, I can't imagine, especially the diabetes one. I was just talking last night about Ben and his diabetes, and a kid I had taught went to diabetes camp. I said, what went on in your camp? He goes, oh, everything was a lot of fun. We learned about nutrition, how to take our insulin, how to store our insulin, how to listen to our bodies to know when we needed insulin or sugar. It sounds like these guys were just dropped, in the middle of nowhere, like D.B. Cooper.
I really do. I hope like hell there were no diabetics at hell camp. I don't think they would not have survived. Because I was trying to figure out how many kids died under Steve Carsano's care, and it's got to be at least like 10, I think, by the count that I had.
Well, and I imagine the count is higher than what we are seeing, and that there were a lot of kids who ran away. And
we kill ourselves after, because the whole thing is that we were abused for our own good, and then like we get home. What was the worst part, the most sad scenes in hell camp are when you see, I didn't have to do this in my school, but this was very common with the other ones, where your kid and they're breaking you down emotionally and doing all this shit, and all of a sudden those kids were looking up and they're seeing their actual parents. And they brought his father into like his emotional growth shit, and the kid is just can't even believe his dad is standing there, whatever. And his dad's almost like laughing at the situation. That stuff it's just brutal, because I knew that kid was crying because he was thinking like, oh my God, am I getting out? Like, am I gonna, like, is this mean that there's freedom? It wasn't a real transformational breakthrough. That kid was like, seeing like, am I free?
I looked it up while you and Rachel were talking. As far as the legitimate specific number of teens that died at the boot camp, they say around 7, but it's such hush. And of course, if it's not judged homicide or even criminally negligent homicide, and that's where I was losing my shit last night, they can say, oh, well, they had a weak heart. Their mother should not have allowed them to go on this, turning it around to the mom.
Oh, yeah. No, the fucked up thing too was that they would say that faking injuries to get attention, or to try to not do anything, or
we had a broken bone back in your leg and keep going, soldier.
I have a scar right here, my finger. I don't know, probably. I had to there would be like a milk machine at CDU, and I had to like cut the nipple of the milk machine. There's like this big razor, and as soon as I cut my finger, I wrapped it up. And I didn't even tell staff what happened. I should have definitely had stitches, because if I had even told staff that I cut my finger, I would get accused of doing it on purpose to try to get out of CDU, to get outside help, to, leave. And so if you got hurt, you didn't say anything sometimes, because if you were smart, you didn't say anything.
Yeah. And if you are hurt, legitimately hurt, the chances are good. If they think you're faking, they'll be like, fine, lay there. You can catch up with us in an hour as it bakes to be 115 degrees.
Oh no, because there was the whole peer pressure. Like everybody had to do, because I was that person, like I'm the last person running. Like I'm so not physically, like we're gonna do a lot of running at my, and I was always the last in line. I had to do it like it because it's that whole army mentality, or like it's like a boot camp. It's like you're only as strong as your like weakest person, and so
This reminds me of The Long Walk.
Yeah, very much.
that is you. I haven't seen the movie yet, but that's one of my favorite Stephen King books.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you should definitely see the movie. It's very
Very
good.
to the book.
Oh, good, yeah. But yes, when I read The Long Walk, King, I feel like he knows about the troubled teen industry extensively because I think he wrote The Institute about us too. He's a recent book.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
This was such a hard watch, and we must have screamed at the TV 100,000 times as we're watching these kids and what they're going through. And one of the girls says, when she got there, she had been chewing gum, and one of the kids like, "Can I please have your used gum?" Even though it had no flavor, and kids were begging for her food, and like that they're going through this whole process, and then we're watching them have to slaughter animals to feed themselves, which was the worst thing I've ever seen up until later things in the documentary.
Yeah, and that was, and at that point I turned to Ben and I said, as a member of the Jewish faith, would you be allowed to eat an animal that not only you slaughtered, but in a non-kosher way? And he didn't really have an answer for me because he's never had to do that, thank God. But
Right.
Rachel looked at me, and that's when we die. That's when we die.
Well, and as I'm sitting here, I recently discovered I have a pretty severe food allergy. I'm allergic to gluten, and I don't know that they would have cared if I were in one of those camps.
Yeah, no, mine was fancy compared to the rest, but no, they probably wouldn't have. The really tough wilderness school that like I knew of back then was called SEUS, and it stood for School of Urban Wilderness Survival. And right when I got to CEDU in 1994, I met a girl named Michelle, and she had just gotten sent to CEDU but she went to SEUS first, and she was telling me that like she had to learn how to eat ants to survive. Like that's because they and when I made my when I started filming and I had to make like just a clip for a Kickstarter that failed, but I chose to use a really short clip of my friend just talking about going to SEUS because he was able to do it really funny. I can sum it up for you. He was just like, so I got sent to the School of Urban Wilderness Survival where you have to hike this trail until they tell you to stop. He's like, I've never been hungrier before in my life ever. It's a level of hunger you cannot imagine. They didn't fuck with your mind at all, and I really appreciated that. but
literally starving and making weird ass decisions.
Yeah, but he was thankful because at SEUS they didn't do attack therapy. They didn't do the like mental breaking down. It was just about the physical challenge of it. It was just about the actual doing of it. They didn't scream at him and make him confess childhood things and scream about his parents and and then also call his other peers things like whores and
And I wanted to ask you specifically because there was a section of the documentary where they talked about how the kids were controlled and about how if you shared food with someone, you were denied food in your next meal. And if you were caught stealing food, they bound your hands, and how they would put rocks in your bag as a punishment and force you to carry the extra weight. Like, I know that you were not at this particular hell camp, but did you see similar stuff?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Especially there was that one kid where they couldn't break that one kid.
Matthew, yeah, the one that they dragged behind like a car or a horse or something.
And it reminded me of my friend Mike Balaban, who I have recently. So there was a boy named Mike Balaban that I was at CEDU with, and he was on the Cult Vault many times before I was. The Cult Vault is a pretty big cult podcast and that I was on recently. But he and I are now working together on my documentary. But when he was at CEDU, he was like that. He was not gonna let them break him down. What they did to him is they gave him a stump. There was a huge tree stump on our campus, and they gave him like a shovel and I think maybe one pickaxe. And he had to take out a giant tree stump. It took I think 3 or 4 months. And in the middle of that, he was sent away to a hell camp. So at my school, we had a scent, which it's spelled ASCNT. And it was like our version of hell, it was like our wilderness. If you didn't fall in line with the rules, you could get sent away for a month or two in Idaho and then come back, and it's like a second level of a reform. But if you were smart, you just followed the rules so you didn't get sent away to one of the places. But even our version of like this was nicer than hell camp because it was teepee. Like you actually had teepees and there was a campus, and like it wasn't, you were in the middle of nowhere in like Idaho, but constantly moving. Like at hell, for hell camp, they were like almost on the run. They were like almost like fugitives. There was no I think they had like a couple of maybe base camps, but the kids never even stayed there. It was just places they had to. Yeah.
Yeah, in the documentary, they said that they would drive the food to another camp and then make the kids walk there.
Right.
And so that if you wanted to be fed, if you wanted water, if you wanted to stay alive, you had to keep walking.
Yeah, that was at CETA. We were lucky enough that we were warned by the people that were older that had gone on those wilderness trips and be like, take care of your feet. If you get a blister, you're going to be walking on a blister for 2 weeks. Or like, you had to learn how to like hold 50 pounds of weight on your back at 14 years old. That's normal stuff.
Was there any medical personnel there at all? I mean, because Rachel and I are sitting here and, she's got the celiac disease. Ben has diabetes. I have depression. And I'm just, God forbid, Ben had gone into diabetic shock in the middle of fucking nowhere. They just leave. Well, first they probably think he was faking it.
So I was friends with I graduated with 3 people who had diabetes. Like, and there was like, I think there was 17 people that I graduated with. So it's a pretty high statistic. They were definitely in danger, but they would do is like, they would just, I'm gonna die if I'm not allowed to have a piece of candy right now. And
right. Exactly.
they would say stuff like that. And then like, yeah, they wouldn't get it. They were okay, but there were times where like there was one nurse on staff and she would come just to give meds to the kids. She wasn't like a real nurse. She wasn't like giving first aid. She was just like administering meds. Yeah, no, there was no doctors. Like there was like a family doctor in town that like would check us all out. But I found out he's deeper involved in this entire industry than I.
Even something simple as a food allergy. I mean, Rachel discovered she has a sensitivity to gluten, and even something as simple as cross-contamination. She found an onion ring in a bag of something that...
Yeah, I had a bag of tater tots, which are a naturally gluten-free food. It's just potatoes. And I was having reactions to it, and I couldn't figure out why. And we got to the bottom of the bag, and there was an onion ring
right
in the bottom of the bag. And so I had been cross-contaminated, and that's what was making me sick.
Right.
And
well, I think back then we didn't have gluten as an allergy though either. Like it was, the early 90s.
I mean, I'm allergic to bee stings. I'd have died of anaphylaxis 1,000 miles away from, anything.
There were a couple kids that actually did have those shots in their dorm, or were, you know what I mean? There were a few, but it was definitely dangerous though. Like it was absolutely, it was. Yeah,
I mean,
kids that would like, there were definitely stories of like people would try to get broken bones just so that like themselves so badly, so they would have to get taken to the hospital at some point, and so then they would try to tell those nurses at hospitals like, they're making me, but they had those places in set. Those wherever kids were sent, those second places were already told. These kids are going to say these things, and they're, a part of everything. So it doesn't matter. Wherever CEDU is going to bring you,
right?
They already know to not believe anything you're going to say.
We're going to Dr. Mengele, basically.
They're master manipulators. You heard Steve say it. That was...
Yeah, exactly. And Rachel and I were talking about, at least, especially for Matthew, the hospital is the safest place for it. He's getting proper nutrition. He's got an IV giving him fluids, antibiotics. There's a social worker somebody could talk to. He's actually in a real bed with pillows, and people who care about him. Sure.
Yeah, and it was so difficult to watch because I don't even like regular camping. Like, I am not interested in being out in the woods or being out in outdoors. And like, I'm so allergic to mosquitoes. I sunburn so easy. Watching these kids go through this, and later in the documentary, as when they move out of the Utah desert and then they're on the boats and on the tropical islands and in the Samoas, and they're showing pictures of these kids with literally thousands of mosquito bites up their hands and arms and bodies, and watching them. Malaria had to have been present in some of this.
And were they inoculated for malaria? I think not.
Yeah, there's no way. They're talking about the parents at this point when they're talking about Matthew, and he had been what they considered very badly behaved. He was getting tattooed and doing drugs and jumping off bridges and all of this stuff. And he looked like a 1980s punk kid.
Yeah.
Like that, he had the mullet and the leather jacket and the whatnot.
Yeah.
And then they showed the pictures that were taken of him in the hospital where he was emaciated to where his hips were sticking out from his body and he was covered in scars, and constantly, like, they said that the nurses looked at his body and saw healing wounds that had been there before in addition to the new. And I'm watching this thinking I would have killed them. I would have found a way to kill those adults and found a way to get out of there. And obviously they break your brain so that you don't think of that when they put you in the program.
Right.
But he was so badly abused, and they used this moment to lead into, and our parents paid them to do it.
Yep. And that's the thing, is that's why they don't believe us.
Yep.
That's why the parents never believe. Okay, no, go ahead. Yeah.
Did you, before your parents sent you off here, did you have a medical physical by a real doctor or a psychological screening by a social worker, or was it just, oh well, all systems are go?
I got expelled out of 8th grade for being an idiot. I was out of control. You know what I mean? But only in I was in 8th grade. My mother had beat me most of my life, and my dad had figured it out, and he slowly got custody, because this was, the late 80s. For a man to get custody, this is
the same way. He had, and his ex-wife had to be declared medically incompetent in order to do that. So I feel you there.
But so by the time that my dad got custody, we had a nanny who was our old babysitter. She didn't care what I did. I was let her do whatever I wanted. So it was like the first time in my life that I was like, I wasn't getting beat. And my dad was a pilot, so I had a lot of freedom. So I just kind of partied for 2 years and ended up getting expelled at 8th grade. My dad brought me to an educational consultant. And they were like, oh, there's this fancy school, CEDU, whatever. That's how. And then those people always get paid $1,000. And that was in the early 90s. Now it's like $5,000. So if you're a parent and you find out your kid is in trouble, and like right now, high schools will tell, or middle schools will say, you have to send your child to somewhere because they're either being disruptive, they're not going to class. Like, there's no system in place, like school. This is in the school systems now, like the whole industry. So they'll say, like, you have to pick somewhere to go for your kid to go now. Like, that's just the way it is. But yeah, so then they'll go to an educational consultant. The educational consultant will say, like, oh, is your child autistic? No, then there are all these schools that specialize in autism. They don't specialize in anything other than having kids mask, autism, and they do things like exposure therapy, so that
oh God,
yeah, it's awful. So they try to basically like teach the autism out of kids. That's just one of the things that they do. Yeah, but those kids are also housed with kids with like OCD or hardcore drug.
Why do they shake their finger in the face and go, "You just stop having that autism"? You know, and which Rachel and I were also talking about. What about, yes, kids misbehave, sure, but what about those with legitimate mental illness, perhaps previous sexual assault that they're now going to have to relive?
there's a doctor named Dr. Marcel Chapuis that was a part of, I don't know if I don't think he was a part of the schools in Hell Camp, but he was part of the WASP, WWASP schools. And he would, I don't even know if I should say what he would do, but he was a sexual therapist for children in the troubled teen industry.
Oh God.
It's so much worse than what even you think it is.
Yeah, that tops the list there.
This guy is still alive and practicing. I think that I think like a month ago we looked up and he's moving, but he was still practicing. And guess what state? Utah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Land of looking the other
And
way.
he's a known MK Ultra doctor. It's more when recent stuff about MK Ultra came out, like in the last 20 years, his name was all over those. Like he's known part of it. Yeah.
Well, and when your dad decided to send you away, clearly it was not he needed to do something.
Right.
Did he understand what he was sending you into?
Partially because he knew that it was based on EST. So EST was something that came out of the human potential movement of the 70s. It was Eckerd seminars training. Do you know what EST is?
I'm old enough to remember EST.
Yeah, so my parents met in an EST seminar.
Oh.
So like he knew when he brought me to see it. I think they kind of told him, "Oh, this is based on primal scream therapy or EST. It's based on psychotherapies from that era." And because my dad is actually a hypnotherapist, he's actually the first person in history to copyright a therapeutic process, and he invented a kind of hypnotherapy that teaches people not to be afraid of flying because he's also a pilot.
Oh wow! So behavior modification, like
this my dad. Yes,
okay.
when my dad was like, "Oh, there's a school that uses stuff that I'm aware of and I'm okay with. This is fine." And my dad never visited like this stuff. Like there were things where my dad was supposed to visit and be a part of things, and he never did because he's like, "Oh, I already did S. I don't have to do that."
Okay.
But he knew, but he didn't. But so like when I left, my dad's he's a social worker, and I'd been trying to tell my dad my whole life, like, "Hey, Dad, that place you sent me, like, I can't listen to songs because of it. I'm still screaming in my sleep because of it. Like, I can't really go to therapy because of it because they don't really understand what's wrong with me." And that's why I'm making the documentaries, because my dad still doesn't believe me. So it's
PTSD that these kids had to have gone through, and one of them, who was an actual combat veteran in Vietnam, said that he doesn't dream about Vietnam nearly as often as he does about this boot camp.
Oh yeah, he was the staff too. He was like somebody. Yeah. And that's even funnier too, is because he was the staff. He wasn't even somebody that was super, because they made him do stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, and I was just taken aback. Like, as a parent, I have a teenage child. You could not pay me to send her to some place that I had not vetted, to go into extraordinary detail to make sure it's the very best place for her. And you most certainly could not ask me to do that and ask me to give you $50,000. That's definitely not going to fly. So I don't know what people are thinking when they are choosing to send their kids to these places.
They're saving their child's life. It's this lie that every school sells. There's a whole building at my campus. There's an entire building of people I never saw. All they did was lie to parents. It's called the admin building. All they did was like, "Oh, so when you talk to your child this week, they're gonna say crazy things." None of it is true. And
also the brochures and the literature they handed out to the parents made it look like, especially when they were in Jamaica and Bermuda and all those places,
Those
made it look like, oh, what a lovely vacation. Oh, I triggered something.
no, no,
What's
no,
that?
no, no, no.
Oh,
Those are even worse. I don't get triggered. Those are even worse. What's funny is, so I'm a licensed scuba diver. I was a licensed scuba diver when I was 13.
you've done a lot.
I just was a white girl in Connecticut. That's what happens. So so when I was young, I had a PADI scuba diving license. So when I got in trouble, my dad was looking up things, and he saw a school that was in a tropical place and kids scuba diving, right? So my dad calls the school and he's like, "Oh, I'm looking at this place to send my daughter. Is she gonna need her scuba diving equipment? For scuba diving. She has her PADI scuba diving license." The school did not know what a PADI scuba diving license
Oh boy.
was. So my dad was like, "I guess I should look into another school." And I'm thankful. I thought I'm not sure what one it was, but like the schools that are in Jamaica, that's Tranquility Bay. I have friends that went to Tranquility Bay, and those kids, if they were in trouble, they had to lie on their face in the cement, and they have scars from
all over their chin. Oh God.
with rocks in them sometimes, because they would have to line up a plank position with their arms behind them with all their weight on their chin for an unknown amount of hours in the hot sun.
I'm thinking about my boobs now, to be honest. Face and boobs. That was oh.
So dumb. But
Yeah.
it's one of even the questions from my documentary is that like most of us have some sort of permanent physical
Sure.
injury from these things,
Yeah, and as we were watching this documentary, Steve just seemed like he was covered in Teflon. Kids died and were dragged behind vehicles, and he would go in front of the court and the jury would find him not guilty. And then he would go and open a new school in another location and do the exact same fucking thing. And every time he moved on, he aimed for more wealthier and wealthier people.
Sure.
And eventually was at the point where when he had the schools out on the boats and in the tropical islands, he was
didn't he have a Rockefeller?
he had Rockefeller. He had children of politicians. He had like famous, rich people that were sending their kids there.
That is very, very on purpose. It is that endorsement
to Jeffrey Epstein.
all tied together. Yeah, his name has been coming up because I think that Jeffrey Epstein was asking just where he could send kids, and then like somebody sent back, "Oh, there's this school, and one of his schools is on the list." But there's another connection as well too, and I forget what it is. But these places are like the Epstein. The more the Epstein list that comes out, the more we're gonna see that I'm sure that there's much bigger connections.
Yeah, I was shocked, and it seemed like for me, if I got dragged in front of a court and I had, something I had done had killed a child,
Ugh.
a young teen.
So remorse.
Yeah, I mean, I would have, not only would I have been remorseful, but I would have gone on to find a new career. And he seemed almost like
his daughter being like, "Dad, will you get another job? I just want to
on victim advocacy or getting an LC a work license to be a licensed
for Steve. For Steve, it seems like the abuse was the point. Like that's what he wanted to do, was to abuse children, and he wanted to do it in a way where people paid him for that. And
sexual sadist comes to mind. I believe that's part of it.
No, these places harbor those, and I'm lucky. So, like, the reason why I'm okay talking about this, I didn't have it that bad. Like, I thought I did. Like, I made this documentary to tell my dad that she'd freaking ruined my life beyond recognition. And after, like, I'm at 3 years of this, I had fucking nothing. I seriously, like, and that's the only reason why I'm able to talk about it. I didn't get molested. I didn't get beat. I didn't get like locked in a room. You know what I mean? Like I didn't get, there's a lot of things that didn't happen to me. So like, that's the only, but I never made, a lot of times these places made you lie about stuff because they didn't believe that you were sent there for no reason. So a lot of these kids, all of a sudden, they're like, "You didn't get sent for no reason. You're a whore. You had sex for money. You did hair. yeah, fine. And then they break down and they say yes. And then those parents are told this. So when those kids leave, their parents think that they're like even worse than, and then yeah. So it's I mean, most of these people, the kids that would go to these places always did all the drugs after they went to these places. They I mean, they never, it was never a situation where they were like scared straight. Ever. Like ever, ever, ever.
Well, and when you think about drug addiction for a lot of people, not everybody, but for a lot of people, is self-medicating for pain that people cannot see or address in other ways. So when you take someone and you torture them for a year or two in one of these camps, of course they're going to turn to drugs when they get out of there.
Escapism, of course.
The horrible thing about hell camp too is, so like they were like, it was like 60 days they said, or you know, it was like supposedly. But if you didn't, you know, if you didn't do something, or you know, you went against something, or you didn't break down the way they wanted you to, or they didn't see that you had be changed, that, you know, they could keep you indefinitely. And that was the worst. Like when I tell other survivors of the other schools, I'm like, yeah, you know, when I got to CEDU, I knew I had 2.5 years. Like that was like, that's how long you had. And that is a lot to take. It's just like, when you're 14, that's like forever. That's, you know, I was my freshman and sophomore year of high school. Biggie Smalls became a huge rapper and then died. I graduated. I didn't know who, had never known who he was. Like that's, they missed out on time. But yeah, like other kids, they were there like indefinitely. Like I know kids that were at these places for like 4-5 years.
Oh God. I mean, I remember there's this one kid who was begging to come home, and he's like, I'm 18. I don't have to stay here. And I actually leaned forward and screamed at the TV, that's false imprisonment, you twit. That's an
Yep.
Amendment violation.
Because parents,
the prayer, that's a First Amendment violation, forcing prayer. Oh my God.
no, because the whole thing was that they would keep the kids after the 18th birthday, because if they would say like, well, you can leave, but like, you know, your parents are going to take you home. You have to finish the program or else you are nothing to your parents. It's that whole like tough love thing. Tough love is like the worst freaking thing in the world. There should never, those words should never be used as like a healthy thing whatsoever. There's no like forceful treatment, or like, you know, even like interventions are harmful. If you're like forcing like treatment on something that doesn't want it, it's not gonna take. It doesn't work.
Well, and as they were getting into the Samoas and the camp that was up there, these are forced labor camps. They came with nothing and forced these children to dig out the ditches to be able to run water and build the buildings. And like these kids they didn't have any construction experience. They were being forced to do this basically at gunpoint, you know.
Oh, and when they had to do that work, it wasn't like leisurely. Like I've had to do like physical labor in front of people that I love, and it scares the shit out of them, because so like I had to dig a hole for my cat dying once. And my boyfriend filmed some of it, because afterwards he was like, how do you know how to dig a hole for a body in under 5 minutes? And like, because when I've ever used a shovel in my life has been at CEDU. And like, if you weren't doing it with everything you have, like 200%, you were yelled at. You were sick, like you had to. So like, they were just used to doing stuff with so much so that you're almost hurting yourself while you're doing it.
And then those same kids, like they were there, they were being tortured and starved and left to the bugs. And when the reporter who they're talking to through this whole thing finally figured this out, and the kids somehow, I don't even remember how, managed to make a video explaining what was happening to them. And one of the parents got the video, and so they're tracking this down. And when the Samoas sent, the U.S. Embassy sent like Black SUVs full of law enforcement, we're going to fix this. And none of the kids were there because they had taken them all to the beach to hide them. Like,
and then they found the kids tied up together, and they're like, are you guys trafficking children across Lake? Because the police were like, why are you trafficking children tied together? It wasn't even like,
jeez.
it was so weird to watch that clearly they knew what they were doing was illegal, and if that anybody had ever found them, that they would be arrested and they would be tried. So rather than feeding the kids and giving them some bug spray and trying to do it right, they just tried to hide the evidence of their crimes. And then the parent who snuck the video out managed to get this out. They were doing all this stuff. I was so incredibly impressed by the wherewithal of these people to figure their way out of this abuse in this way. But then Steve just goes on and does it somewhere else.
And that's how they all are. That's how there's for all of these schools, there's like, I can list off a dozen of these kinds of schools where there's a guy that ran them that was just like that. Like that he just kept on opening new schools, that even complained about, why can't I open new schools? Well, because all these lawsuits, you know what I mean? Like, and then there's NATSAP. So NATSAP, it's NATSAP. NATSAP was started in 1999, and it is an umbrella corporation that is the accreditation for the entire troubled teen industry. You can pretty much figure out how many troubled teen industry schools there are by looking at the NATSAP website.
Ooh.
And I only really figured it out recently because I had to look up I forgot what it was, and I looked it up, and I looked up all the schools. I'm like, every single one of these schools, I've talked to somebody who went there, and they're all hell. And I'm like, this is the list. This is almost the master list. But then, like, the Hyde School in Maine isn't on that list because they don't have to. They're the Hyde School in Maine. They have all celebrities' children there. So they have celebrity endorsements like Cher and Michael McDonald, and many celebrities' kids went to the Hyde School in Maine.
Cher sent
Chaz's brother, Elijah Blue Almond. He went there in the early 90s. I have pictures of him on my phone from when he was there in the early 90s. You might know him from later on in the later 90s. He was in a band called Jedsey. They had a song called The Key to Gramercy Park. But the cover of the Jedsey album is a cartoon horror, art, rendering of the Hyde School, of like the campus. Yeah, like Cher, when the leader of the Hyde School, his name was Joe Gald. When Joe Gald died, Cher made her son play the funeral, like play guitar at his cult. It'd be like playing Steve. It'd be like, a kid that went to hell camp playing guitar at Steve Carsano's funeral because shit, yeah. And the conservatorship, when you were talking about the Britney Spears thing, right? Cher did that with her son. This happened about 2 years ago, because it was also happening to me around the same time. But Cher was trying to put Elijah either in, some sort of institution or whatever. But she was trying to do a conservatorship on the money that he gets from his dad, because his dad was Greg Almond from the Almond Brothers. So he gets all that Almond Brothers money. So it was funny to listen to your whole thing, because Cher controls, and it was funny that we didn't know where Elijah was for a while. He wasn't on social media, but we could tell who was controlling his social media on Instagram, because Cher was making all these dead posts as her son.
Oh boy, this goes even further than. Oh my God. I was joking to Rachel earlier. I feel like we're Woodward and Bernstein.
No, it was funny because, when Ben was like, oh, you should talk to my wife. She's making this podcast about, talk about, and I was like, this is perfect. I was like, I don't know which documentary we talk about first.
I know, right?
Well, and as the documentary went on, we find out that Steve is no longer alive. He had aggressive colon cancer for 6 or 7 years, and then he had a heart attack, which I think was not painful enough.
No,
he should have dealt with a lot worse than that.
Yes.
And so he's no longer with us, but his wife still seems very supportive of everything he did. Like, she loves what he did, thought it was great. And then as they get to the end of the documentary, that's the very last 2 minutes is the woman talking about how Steve sexually assaulted her. at the camp. Like, he himself, not one of his employees, but he himself sexually assaulted her. And then it follows with a little quote. The family does not want to deny the allegations because they don't want to, go against your lived experience, but this is not the man that they knew.
That's pretty amazing that even they said that much.
That's the worst case of Stockholm syndrome I've ever heard of. I mean,
I actually thought that was pretty. I mean, that's the most I've heard admission that I've actually heard. Like I was like, well, at least they said that. You know what I mean? Like at least they said we're not. It didn't happen. We just didn't. You know what I mean? Like that's
Yeah, I mean their thing is that doesn't sound right, but okay.
You wouldn't say like the Paris Jackson thing. Like there's no way my dad did anything. It's not like that.
I was just floored at how much nobody seems to care. Like, this continues to be a problem. This continues to feed into, like, as we're finding stuff released in the Epstein files and all of that, some of these kids have to have been disappeared into that world. Like,
that's huge. That is huge. That is huge, huge, huge. The Rebecca School of Girls. You should look into that. There's schools in the troubled teen industry that sold babies. They were for pregnant teens, and they would find out if the children were going to be born black or white. There's there were some places that if there were pregnant teens would come and they would sell the white kids and would bury the not white kids.
I am so appalled by all of this, and I am
like, they can't handle it, and I'm like, it's just really not that. we've known about this stuff for a while.
Yeah. So the Hell Camp documentary is just one drop in the massive, massive ocean of crap and vile nonsense that is the whole teen torture industry.
And I think that that's one of the things that makes it so hard for the public to even think about helping. What are you good? Because it's so overwhelming. It's like, I can't believe you guys even made it through, watching it. There's the program also that's like the 3-part one, but I don't know, most people can't watch past the first episode because it's so overwhelming. It's like you're watching child abuse on screen and you're trying to process it, and there's no clear call to action of what you're supposed to do other than you're gonna follow Paris Hilton on Instagram and hope she does something. That's totally not working.
And that's what makes me want to ask, how are you doing now?
Oh, I'm good. I've been working on this for 3 years. I have a director. He's a lifelong friend of mine from the music, from just playing music. He's been in the film industry for over 20 years, and he's never done his own his own passion things. He's a musician that fell into film. So when I was like, "Hey, I want to make a documentary. Can you help me?" He was able to borrow $100K worth of equipment for our interviews. And so, but I knew that this was a story that that was nobody was really on it or talking about my specific side of it, because the whole thing is that my school is kind of the commercial or the model home for a huge part of the industry. Steve Carsano's schools, they were a small leg, but out of the Synanon, out of the cult of Synanon, there was about 4 rivers of schools that came, and mine was one of those. Mine was one of those big ones, because out of my school, when I was there from 94 to 96, I remember about 12 staff leaving to work or start brand new schools. And so I'd met kids that went to those, all those schools. So yeah, I commend both of you for, consuming this. It's good for me because, I'm trying to make a documentary to, wrap all of these other documentaries together too. And it's I have to figure out how to make child abuse and something so sad consumable for the public. You know what I mean? And I don't think that there's been a formula yet
Well,
because
you
it's a hard
certainly
watch.
accomplished it this time. And Rachel and I'd be more than happy to talk to you again, maybe something for your documentary. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. And do you have any particular projects that you're working on right now that you want to tell people about who might be listening? Or
Yeah, so my documentary is, to tie all of these together. It's to pretty much explain how Synanon, and then my school spawned the industry. My school is to pretty much really just figure out it's the brainwashing shit that we all went through. We all had to do these weird other schools called them seminars or but for me they were called profits or workshops, but there were these weird things that were like it's basically the secret sauce of Scientology. It's like that's kind of what it is.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what my documentary is about, and it's we're not going to mostly find this stuff written down. We're all really fucked up in different ways. We all have really similar idiosyncrasies, and
well, I am glad you're getting a chance to make your documentary.
Yes.
And thanks for listening to Real Stories, Real Problems with your hosts, Rachel and Roxanne. We hope you enjoyed our deep dive into the dark side of the troubled teen camps and the documentary Hell Camp. Join us again next week for a glimpse into another financial problem and a documentary all about it. If you enjoyed our show today, please remember to like, subscribe, and leave us a review on your podcast app. Thanks for listening. See you again next week.
Bye for now.